So Mother Askani has just been nerfed, and with her comfortably sitting at the top of the best Series 4 cards in the game list for a while, it feels like the right time to ask, what actually is the next best Series 4 card? It's been about 7 months since I last did my Series 4 tier list, and a fair bit has changed. I mean, Mother Askani has been introduced into the game and nerfed twice since then, so if you're deciding where to spend your tokens, mainly if you're a new player, that's where I'll be focusing more at. Hopefully this video can tell you exactly what's worth getting. So just as a heads up before we fully dive into this, some of the card text stats are not correct, however the cards that I will have popped at the top right of the screen, like this Agony, will have the correct card stats. So with all that said and done, let's actually get into Agony. So Agony before, I think I put Agony at must buy back when it was a 1-3, is still a very strong card and belongs in a decent chunk of archetypes. It goes in the Man Spider stuff, it goes in all the Captain Carter stuff. It's quite fresh after Mother Askani's nerf, so it's a little bit hard for me to say where this card's going to land in that area. However, I do think it will still be quite a staple. Airwalker. So with Airwalker, kind of really only exists in Phantom X. However, now it's a bit better than it was back then. So I think decent card is worth putting it. Now, Annihilus is a sad one. It belongs to an archetype that just doesn't exist in the game anymore, and there's so many cards that make it redundant that it's, I don't know, it's sad that it's fallen on hard times, but some people just don't like clogging the game, so they're not really going to care that this card isn't that great. If the card does get buffed, I don't even know if the archetype would see a comeback, so I'd probably put it about here. Askani Sun, it can go in decent. It belonged in some of those Supergiant type decks, but those decks have just seen enough with Supergiant, so I still think the card is decent. It's like a worse version of Iron Patriot. Astral Projection, now, as I said, I'm focusing this series at newer players, and Astral Projection is a high skill cap card that belongs in very few combo decks. So I think, honestly, I'd probably place it around here. Orsamandy has actually got some buffs recently, and criminally underplayed, I think. Also, I'm going to put Askani Sun just above Airwalker, because I think it is better. Orsamandy better than it gets credit for. Batroc. Now, usually I don't put archetype-specific cards in S tier, but Batroc might just have to be an exception, because this is just such a good card. A 1-cost scaler for move, and with so many move cards out there now, you can always make this work with anything. Beta Ray Bill. Now, as much as I want to like this card, it's probably going to have to go mediocre. I did play it a little bit when Shadowlands Daredevil came out, but other than that, it's hard to find a home for it these days. Black Knight. Black Knight is in very specific discard archetypes that just don't really see play these days. Sad because it's quite a cool card, but probably not as... yeah, I don't think it's as unplayed as Annihilus. Also, I've just swapped those two because I think it's better that way. Blob. Blob is a pretty good Series 4 card. Didn't know it was a Series 4 card until I just placed it here, but pretty good 6-drop is what I was trying to say. Probably here. If you're looking for a good 6-drop early on and you don't really have much, it's just a good one to get. Cannonball. Cannonball has fallen on hard times. I think here, mainly because you sort of need to have Mercury to make this card even work anymore, seeing as Professor X isn't a thing. For that reason, maybe it belongs around here, which is crazy to say because this card used to be a menace. Chameleon. I'm actually a big advocate for Chameleon. I think this card is underplayed for what it can do. Last turn, you can just copy the text from a card you played and just pop off, kind of. Maybe it belongs here instead of strong card, because technically it's not really seen the play to become a strong card. Now, in a world where Gambit Horseman is running amok and there's created cards all over the place, and a card like Cobra still isn't seeing play, I think it belongs in bad card, honestly. It's... the awkward thing with it is, to destroy a created card, you have to play it in the location where a created card is and then activate it the turn after, or play it and hope they play on that location. But because this card's an activate, it just makes it so awkward. Corvus Glaive is a very good discard card without flicking through all the discard cards, it's probably the one I'd rate highest if you're a discard player to get, so definitely belongs in strong card. Cull Obsidian. Now this card was kind of the premier 4-drop. Now with Akari in the game, and Akari's still not seeing play, I don't think Cull Obsidian is really going to see play either. It is a bit easier to get off than Akari, but the 2 points of stats make up its difference. Now Daken. Daken again belongs in sort of specific archetypes, a bit like Astral Projection. However, Daken is actually pretty decent. But as I said before, because this is aimed at newer players, it's a little bit harder to actually get all the pieces you need to make Daken work. Danger. I really want to like this card. However, it just doesn't see play. It could technically be better with all of the buff cards that have come out recently, but nobody's really messed around trying it, so I'm going to sit it here. Darkhawk. I think Darkhawk is just still a solid card to just get early on. You have Korg and Rockslide and things like that, and this is one of those cards that definitely gives you the push early on. Dragon Lord. Now, Dragon Lord is going in S tier. Has a few more use cases than Batroc does, but it's basically just the ramp deck version of an S tier card, because it is perfect in those decks, being able to play it down to just pull something out of your hand and then Grandmaster it or something like that. 100% recommend this card. Deafening Chord. This card fell off a decent amount after it got nerfed, removing its damage output. It's still okay as a card. However, I think I put it in S tier before. I think it's earned its spot in decent. Elsa Bloodstone. I think Elsa's pretty good. There's a lot of buff things nowadays, and it kind of works in some decks, maybe more around here. The decent card list is stacking up quite a bit. Fanfei. I kind of like Fanfei. She's a decent move card that is just underplayed. However, because she's locked into that kind of archetype, and for a card that you have to play on turn 4 or 5, otherwise she's kind of useless, is a little bit of a problem. But I'm going to stick her here for now. Fantastica. Now this card, much like Annihilus, used to be good at one point but has fallen off since, and seeing as the end of turn decks aren't around that much anymore, and even when they are, I never see them run this card. It's probably going to have to sit around here. Fastball Special. This is a pretty decent card, actually. Very good destroy card. If you're a destroy player, definitely pick it up. It's good for all those Galactus type lists and all the stuff with Man Spider, but again, specific. But because it's a good destroy card, it's going here. Fire Lord. Another card I want to like. Maybe if there's a few more things to help resurrection decks, it could work. I think there's a new death coming up. Could work with Fire Lord, maybe. We'll have to see. But other than that, I don't know. I think it's kind of decent. It's just very clunky, hard to build around, and just for that reason doesn't see play. Speaking of clunky and hard to build around, first Ghost Rider. Again, another card that I think is better than people give it credit for, but still not that great. I'm going to put it at the bottom of mediocre. Gladiator. Gladiator has actually had its time in the sun and fallen off. When things like Wilson Fisk can come out and just be a 3/9 by default when you have the highest power card in play, Gladiator becomes a bit of a weird one to look at unless you're playing Mill. So for that reason, I'm going to sit it here on the decent cards. Gorgon. I used to look at Gorgon and put it in a lot of decks and kind of persuade people to take it more seriously than it was. However, that's when Merlin was running around. However, now it's not really as big of a thing. Back when Victoria Hand, before it had Gambit Horseman as well. I still think it's a decent card to look at. Definitely, with all the creative stuff. But people weren't playing it when Mother Askani was a thing, and that's probably the best time to have been playing it, so I'll put it in decent card. Grandmaster. Grandmaster deserves its must-buy status. When this card released, people were upset it wasn't as good as they expected it to be. However, it has aged much nicer now, and belongs in some of the top, tier lists of the ladder. Hellion is an interesting move card, but when people are playing move decks and for the entire season basically, and Hellion isn't really seeing play, people are just playing Heimdall instead of it. I would put it around here in recommendations of picking up. It is better than Fanfei, but again, it's a little bit clunky for what it is. Hit Monkey. The problem is, because bounce isn't a thing, I would like to put it here. But because bounce isn't a thing and Boomerang hasn't helped bounce, it's probably got to go around here. If you're purely in it for the bounce, get Hit Monkey, but if not, you're going to have to wait for bounce to become relevant, I'm afraid. Hydroman. Again, another card that feels like it should be decent. There was a deck running around where you could play Hydroman and Cable on the same turn and basically steal their card, and then their card would have been a 1-cost because you've taken the top card of the deck. Pretty cool combo. Problem is you have to have 7 energy to make that work, and it's not as reliable. Kind of a meme deck more than an actual deck, I think, and for that reason it probably exists more around here. Ikari. People are starting to take Akari a little more seriously. With the release of Scorpion soon, this video will probably go up before Scorpion's release. I think there's going to be a lot more decks running Afflict, meaning Akari can actually kind of just be played. Might be a better card to play than Luke Cage, if you're expecting a bunch of Afflicts on a week. However, Luke Cage did just get nerfed, but again, this is not an OTA video. I was going to date the video pretty hard, but I still think Akari is pretty good. And there's a couple of move cards that have Afflict abilities, even something like a Man Thing. This card is a lot easier to play than people give it credit for. Iron Lad. I think Iron Lad is a must-buy. It's one of those cards that almost feels like a card draw, except you're sort of duplicating a card. You just, as long as your deck is full of good things, you know Iron Lad's always going to hit something great, so I'm confident with must-buy. Jennifer Kale is a weird one. Probably goes somewhere like here. It's a ramp card that is one of the last ramp cards you'd consider putting in a deck, so I'd say she goes here. Then we have J. Jonah Jameson, so no, I'm just joking. Unless you really, really love swearing at people, I guess. This card isn't out yet. I'm doing this rating ahead of time, but it is a 1/3 that is pretty much just going to be used in, what do you call them, ongoing decks. I had a thought for a second if I was to do that. Okay, my bad. I realized I could zoom in a little bit more there for you. So J. Jonah Jameson is pretty much going to be a 1/3 used in ongoing decks. However, Ant-Man becomes like a 1/4, I think, if its location is full in an ongoing deck. So unless you're wanting 2 1-costs, it probably sits around here. Might be better than I gave it credit for in my review for that reason. But still nothing incredible. King Eitri. King Eitri's, yeah, maybe goes like here. King Eitri works in those Daredevil decks. He works with Arisham and all those kinds of things. I guess, seeing as I recommended Arisham pretty high for a new player, maybe you'd want to get King Eitri for the same reason. Play it in that deck and then draw out something. Maybe here feels too good for it, but I could always adjust it if I feel like it later. Lasher. Yeah, Lasher's a weird one. It exists in a couple of decks that do well at increasing its power. However, with all the buff cards out recently, people are still not playing it. Probably around here. However, with Scorpion, it could maybe do something decent. Now, speaking of Scorpion and Afflict, we have Lao Fei. I think Lao Fei is a pretty decent card. It's very good for Afflict. Maybe it goes here. Because I did just call it a decent card, you know. Legion. Legion always exists up here. It's just a very good all-rounder card where people just won't expect that you're playing it, and for that reason you can steal cubes a lot of the time. I think it's one of those cards that I don't see much play, but I always know that it will do well when I see it played, or it has a very high win rate percentage. I haven't seen the stats on it, but it's just the way that I feel about the card. Loki, again, in the cards that have fallen off but might still see some play somewhere category. It belongs here. It's just a card that's a shadow of its former self. Mad Thinker. Mad Thinker is a card that is a couple of new cards off being a very viable deck, I feel. I got this in a couple of decks where I've generated cards before and had it on the board, and if my hand's been full and I draw a card every turn, it's just been going to crazy power levels. Similar to Batroc levels, but because its archetype doesn't support it and you have to make sure you've got a full hand, is not great, so it's going to sit around here. Majestic Wingbeat, actually a very good card. One people don't really talk about very much when they're considering good cards, I feel, but it exists in quite a few decks, and what it does is a win condition for quite a few of those, so it's got to sit around here. Major Victory. Now, Major Victory is just a worse Agent Coulson, and Agent Coulson doesn't see play. I mean, I guess that's about all I have to say. Man-Thing. Now, Man-Thing is, I feel, pretty good. I'm going to have to put Man-Thing here. If you're playing it in a Flick deck, you don't have to worry too much because you're probably running Cage, right? But also, a lot of the time, its stats go up pretty high if it's just afflicting the enemy's side. It's something people don't really consider too often, but definitely keep an eye out for it. Now, Marrow. Marrow is the S-tier list version of a, I guess, destroy discard combo card. Either that, or if you're going for Dormammu. I feel like the card is very good, especially in those lists that I just mentioned. And for that reason alone, I'm going to have to put it there. I even feel like in those Dormammu or like Phantom X lists, you could run the new Scorpion, which could bump some of these cards up a little bit. So because I don't have the ability to see into the future to see how well that card does, you're going to have to let me know, I suppose, or I will find out in a few days. But with my prediction, I'm going to put it around here. Mercury is a card that again is a shadow of its former self, similarly to Cannonball. However, there's been a lot of move card support recently, so for that reason, it doesn't exist quite as low. Meek is a pretty good discard card. It does tend to be one of the first ones to get cut. If you're running like a Dakin list where you're discarding a bunch of stuff on the last turn, getting Meek out to be a good scaler there is always a nice feeling. Mole Man. Yeah, even with Monstro, Mole Man didn't really do very much, and that's kind of a sad testament to the card itself, but yeah, I'm going to put it around here. Mother Askani. Now, this is Mother Askani after the nerf, where she no longer discounts and buffs the left card of your hand, but just does it to the copy. However, this card did exist probably top of S before this nerf. After the nerf, I don't know. I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, remember the feeling when you played Mother Askani on that location that increases the cost of duplicated cards or whatever else, created cards? She doesn't really feel that great. For that reason, maybe I sit her more like here. This just feels insane because this card was so good for so long. But because I'm doing this fresh off of the balance patch, I might have to assume she's going to land around here. Miss Marvel is a card that, again, doesn't really fit into any archetypes anymore except for C5. And for that reason, unless you're like a new player who really wants to go into a C5 deck and you're looking for cards for it, maybe then, but otherwise it's kind of like, yeah, maybe I wouldn't recommend it. I have a soft spot for Nicholas Scratch. Played a couple of decks with like Merlin and like Prowler, Clear sort of things, and this card has got up some pretty high power levels. Strong card, I'm happy with that. Omega Sentinel, again, pretty strong. It exists in some pretty strong lists. For that reason, kind of has to sit probably more like that. Yeah, very, very decent card. Very above decent card. Ozymandias, again, when it comes down to unlocking new archetypes, I always put these cards in S tier, but because the card is actually just good as well as unlocks its own archetype, I've got to put it in must buy for that reason alone. Fastos is a bit of a weird one. There was a couple of decks that go around with him in it, but then he never really sees that much play, so he probably has to go here on mediocre. Pixie, interesting card. Good probably isn't the word, but decent works. Quicksand. Now this is an interesting one because I haven't played this card since it released, and I haven't seen anyone play this card since it released. So judging it is going to be tricky, but I'll put it like, I think I'm happy with here, and this is my main explanation. I don't see any point in the near future where you would need this card. However, maybe for that reason here. However, if there ever was a meta where people were just getting bonus energy and it was so annoying, like the Star-Lord meta, this card is going to be a necessity to have in your deck. So as it stands right now, it probably belongs like here. But if there was ever a meta, something like that to come out, similarly to how I put Gorgon in S tier before, Quicksand would probably shoot up to like strong card S tier. So just bear that in mind. Ravona exists again in very specific shells. Works in the ongoing list, works in Mr. Negative, and all these other things. I think she just have some pretty good use cases. I'll set her around her. Redshift is a card that is only really used in a very specific discard archetype, which is a weird one to play, and I don't think is too great, so maybe for that reason it's got to sit like here. Sandstorm, I think Sandstorm's strong. Again, it's a rock archetype card, so you're probably going to want to make sure you have Ozymandias if you're getting this one, but for what it is, I do think it's pretty decent. Sasquatch. Sasquatch is a card that's been on the watch list for a little while. Mainly Mother Askani shenanigans or like Gambit or Horseman shenanigans. I can't really remember what decks this was running, but things like that. It's also running Bounce. Maybe more like here. I did used to have it in like a Merlin deck that I really loved, and yeah, I don't know. Pretty decent card. I keep saying that word. Pretty strong card, let's say. It's a 6/11. However, most of the time it's a 5/11 because you're very rarely not playing a card the turn before. And if you think about that on its own, that already makes it a pretty good card that's above stat line. People always say, oh, I'm looking for just a 5/9 to throw in my deck that I need, and then they look towards Ozymandias. However, you don't realize a lot of the time Sasquatch actually is hardly ever a 6-drop. Most of the time it's a 5/11, so if you just think about that alone, it already makes the card feel crazy. Then we have Sebastian Shaw. I guess here works for it. It's a good 3-drop card, maybe more like this. It's a good 3-drop card that's used in Surfer decks, however it's often one of the first cards that gets cut from Surfer, so bear that one in mind. Silver Surfer First Steps. Again, a weird one. You sort of need to know the specific sort of combo type decks that this is ran in, but it also takes like a bit of a learning curve, and I've never really found a reason to put it in my deck because it doesn't feel reliable enough. Maybe then for that reason I'll put it more like here. Scar. Yeah, Scar's deck just isn't really around in the meta. However, when it is, you're going to want this card. And for that reason alone, it's got to sit towards the top of decent. Now for another card that isn't out and I have to rank, Spider Sense. Based on the fact that Aunt May didn't really come out too great, and this card is asking you to play probably 5 movable cards realistically. I don't know how possible that is for it to be a 0 cost. I feel like I could undershoot this card a bit. I don't give it enough credit. I put it here, and yeah, I am playing it safe, but I also rated it about middle of the road. However, they keep buffing all these movable cards recently. I feel like they want to make it work, so who even knows. I guess we'll see soon. Starhawk. Starhawk is a very underrated card. Not many people play it, maybe because it's slightly clunky with the left-right thing. However, it's a 2/3 that can buff an entire lane and then just other effects set it to go off again and keep the buffs going. I genuinely think it's better than people think it is. I'm trying to think of a different phrase than the ones I usually use, but yeah, I'll place it there. Now Stick, honestly, just a really good card. Kinda has to exist in this must-buy category. It is to its decks what Dragonlord is to Ramp and Batroc is to Move. It's one of those cards that you just kind of need it. Yeah. Super Adaptoid. Even in metas where activates are running rampant, Super Adaptoid is rarely ran, so kind of just has to go around here. Supergiant has been nerfed a couple of times, but it has a little bit of a learning curve to playing the card, on top of it being an annoying card, so decent feels about right for it. Terrax. I think this is one of those cards that people just forget about it, or they undervalue it, or they just don't play it, even though honestly it could be kind of good. Maybe for that reason I'm going to put it here. Just people need to put more respect on the card, honestly. The Hunger. Now, if you're looking to start Horde decks, I think Hunger is one of the better ones to actually get early on, because you can run it in decks that don't even just focus purely on the Horde. I think there's like some wacky Phoenix decks that you can play Hunger onto and just get it to proc twice, or like a couple of spell decks or things like that. And it's basically just a 1/3 really at the end of the day. Pretty good card. Living Tribunal. Sad about this card. It's only really run in a couple of decks, and because the way that the power multiplication was changed a couple of patches ago, the card took quite a few strays, so it's got to sit probably more like here, honestly. Then we have Phoenix Force. Phoenix Force is just a weird one. Again, it's a little bit clunky, but also takes a bit of a learning curve, so I guess I'll sit it in decent. Tombstone. This card released and people were expecting big buzz around it, however it just kind of arrived, I guess. It does feel like a good card to put into a Destroy deck if you are a Destroy player, similarly to Fastball. Don't really know which one I'd recommend more. Tombstone hasn't been out long enough for me to make that call yet, however Tombstone is a pretty decent card. Now Topaz has gotten a few buffs recently, making it a better move card than it was before. I think this is 3/5 on my tier list. I think it's like a 2/4 now, something like that, as you'll see on the top right. For that reason, probably one of the better move cards. I don't really know what the highest, I guess Batroc, but other than the Batroc, there isn't really much. Probably lands on Topaz, which realistically does look like it makes sense. Doxy. Another card I want to be good, but just honestly needs as much of like a workaround play pattern as Hydra Man to actually get it to be interesting, so I'll put it here. Triton is now a 3/6. It just recently got buffed. I was running it in a deck, and purely based off the fact it's a 3/6, I think makes it better. There's quite a few times that the opponent was like, if they're playing Destroy, they destroyed their last card. Or if they're playing Bounce, they sent it back to the hand. Or playing Kitty Pryde, then Kitty Pryde gets sent back to the hand. There's quite a few instances where that buff only ever benefits you. And I think that was overlooked quite a bit at first, but now it's a 3/6, maybe people will start looking at that more. Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben is another one of those Dormammu kind of cards. I don't really see it played anywhere else, but what it is, it ends up being a 1/4 that moves a card from a location. Once it's destroyed, I suppose, which isn't too hard of a thing to proc. I don't know, pretty good card. Then we have Valentina. Valentina, I put her in a strong card. Gives you a 6-drop that becomes 4 cost. And just gets ran in those like Gambit Horseman decks. It often gets ran in like a few other decks and does pretty well there, so strong card. I believe she earns that. Wade Wilson here. Destroy card that, yeah, kind of want to be good, but just sadly isn't. There is a couple of cases where people can play it and it does decent things, which is why I haven't put it any lower, but this is roughly where it should go. Websling, seeing as Websling got buffed recently, probably goes here. It's just pretty good for what it does now that it gives like 1 power. I guess similarly to Deafening Chord, once it lost its 1 power, it dropped off a lot. As soon as Websling got its 1 power, it's shot up a lot on my list, so pretty happy with that. Werewolf is a 3-drop that can scale to insane numbers, honestly. Pairs perfectly with Merlin, which is, I suppose, why I'm slightly biased to this card. I liked it even from when they released it. Pretty cool one. Definitely worth running if you're running like a bunch of low-cost on-reveal cards. Wild Child is a strange one to rank, again, because it's like... it's a Phantom X card. Pretty much only a Phantom X card. And because Phantom X is doing decent, technically then Wild Child should be doing decent. However, it's not the primary piece to the deck, so I'd probably recommend picking these up for it, unless you're wanting to play Phantom X, then it's pretty much just get Wild Child and possibly a Mega Sentinel. Marrow, yeah. Yeah, that seems about right. Possibly a Fastball Special. X23. Just a very good Destroy card, however just probably not as good as it used to be after it got nerfed. Yeah, I think this is a comfortable spot for it. Zombie Giant Man is probably the second most important zombie card. Because I've released a video recently of a zombie deck with Zombie Giant Man doing crazy things, I think I'm going to be slightly biased to it. So I'll put it in strong card. Zombie Power Man. For a second I forgot what this card even did. I cannot lie to you. It's a discard card that almost feels like it's a filler discard if you don't have the other discard cards. I guess decent then. And Zombie Sentry, which is now a 2/1. Probably the least important zombie card to get, but is slightly better than what it used to be, so I'll put it in decent. So that wraps up the tier list for the Series 4 cards. We'll just go through them briefly just to make sure nothing feels too out of place. Grandmaster as the first in S, does that feel right? Maybe. Like, I'm tempted to put Stick there, however Grandmaster does have a lot more cases to be used. Maybe... Honestly, I reconsidered that after I said it. It's mainly used in the Mother Askani deck and a couple of other places. Same with Stick, realistically, but I do think this card is just pretty good, and maybe the scariest out of the list here. We have 8 cards, meaning those two make our top 10. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Almost feeling like I could move Iron Lead down to the next row and like bring something like Omega Sentinel, Man-Thing, or Sasquatch up, but these all feel pretty good, honestly. Awesome Andy could probably fall a little bit, and then in the meantime, Starhawk too. But other than that, I can hit Monkey up a little bit. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Well, much shorter than the Series 5 tier list. I hope this list helps you guys out a little bit if you're looking to see what Series 4 cards you kind of want to get without scouring through the internet. I will say, just before I go, that this is my opinion after all, so I encourage you to check out other opinions of other creators if you do want to get a solid idea before cashing out your card at the checkout. But regardless, I hope this helps. And if you do want to stick around, dropping a subscribe will mean the world to me. I have been doing a couple of different style videos recently, so check those out if you want. The zombie video especially, that's one I put more time into. And kind of just getting a gauge for whether people like that kind of content, for if I could do more of it in the future. And yeah, with that said and done, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you all next time.